on the last episode of the BMB. No, I'm just playing. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? It's your boy Malik Washington back at it again with another episode of the BMB, Breaking Mental Barriers, episode 14. How you ladies and gentlemen doing this fine day or evening wherever you all reside? Ladies and gentlemen, the last episode we talked about how faith is introspective, cross-examining that with the David and Goliath saga, touching into how emunah is within you. Emunah is not something that is outside of you or an extension of you. It is taking what you know within yourself and equipping that and making it into a form of consistency within your faith when you act upon the things of which the Most High has prescribed for you to do in your life. If you believe in the kingdom of heaven, if you believe in the resurrection of Yeshua, if you believe in the many teachings of the ancient patriarchs who set the foundations for the prescribed walk that the Most High has beset it on many individuals' lives, then you know that emunah is introspective. It is within you. It is something that you manifest within yourself, and you put it out there in hopes that whatever it is that you believe will come to fruition. Ladies and gentlemen, that the episode actually segues into the following episode, in which we are going to talk about my favorite topic, the law. The law. So you might be sitting here wondering, well, what about the law are we going to talk about, Malik? What are we talking about today when it regards the law? Well, we know that the law is a very controversial topic, and it is controversial in the sense of many believe that the law was done away with under Christ. However, there are some that still continue to follow the law to this day. And some believe that the law is what will get them towards the Most High, that will guarantee their position in the kingdom of heaven. However, these two views are on both extremes, but the law is not what many may think it to be, right? Believing that not keeping the law is important because it's not a requirement. It is the only thing that is required is that you have faith and believe in the mercy and the grace that God prescribes to humanity. And that if you just believe in Jesus in your heart and you believe that he saved you and did all of these different things, well, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, you are going to heaven immediately the day after you die. Why do I say it in that context? Because many of us have been taught by our parents. Our parents have been taught by leaders such as bishops, priests, ministers, you name it, who basically go into talking about that if you just merely believe in something that you prescribe to, you will make it, because we are imperfect human beings. The problem with this belief is that it denotes an antinomian type of view, where you just believe that mere belief or mere coincidence of belief leads to your salvation as a person, because holding on to the crutch that you are imperfect somehow guarantees to the Most High that he's just going to have infinite mercy upon you and not take into account of the things that you have done over the years of your life. In fact, many people believe that because the law was done away with, that the Israelites once followed, it is believed that they are under the law of Christ. There are two particular commandments that are mentioned in the book of Matthew that Jesus had directed towards his disciples. He said the two greatest commandments are that you love God as you love yourself, and that you love your neighbor as God has loved you, right? Now, many people take that and they say that the love aspect of it is what fulfills all things. It fulfills the law. It fulfills everything. You don't have to worry about those other contents. And many people have been led to believe that. However, the issue that stands with this conversation regarding the law is that the two great commandments that are mentioned don't actually take away from the contents that were mentioned by Moshe in the book of Exodus, where the 10 commandments were in place. If you all actually go and read the Old Testament, you will find that many of the things that pertain to loving God and as loving yourself and loving your neighbor as God loves you, actually are all one and the same. The only difference is that love is mentioned as a way to digest the overall or the overarching point of the 10 commandments, is that you are practicing a devout concept known as love, or ahav, right? You're practicing a very servitude concept when it comes to doing goodness in the world, when it comes to being faithful to the people that you love as well as the Most High. If you practice all these things automatically through love, everything else comes into play. For instance, when you go get into a relationship, most of the time you come to find out that the person you used to be when you were single isn't the same person you are when you're in a relationship. Your chemistry changes. You become very excited. You begin to think things that you haven't done yet, but they are now going to come into fruition because you found the man or woman of your dreams. They make you feel some kind of way. And guess what? You start doing things for them you wouldn't have never thought you would do before. But now you're doing it because you're like, what the hell is going on here? I'm in love. The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to love of the Most High and love for the people around you, you are willing to do things as a form of respect, as a form of devotion to the one that you love. For instance, if you know that God gets jealous when you worship other idols, you know what you won't do. As a form of love, you won't what? You won't worship idols. You know that God believes in the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is in one of the 10 commandments. So if you know that the Sabbath is a day of rest and that the seventh day he rested, which we're speaking proverbially because God does not necessarily rest per se, but we know that he created this planet within the totality of 7 days, however you wish to calculate that. But the short story of it is that at the seventh day of the week, which would be considered Saturday, he rested. He stopped. He completed his work. It was good. With that being said, he commanded that the Israelites follow the Sabbath as well. Gentiles did the same when they came into the culture. They were sojourners. Anybody that worshiped Yah or came into the covenant of Yah, which is referring to the Most High himself, he that causes to exist, they followed the Sabbath as well. And you know to keep the Sabbath as a form of love and devotion to Yah. Yeshua speaks in this very same context and nothing changed. But let's also examine the other aspect too. There are some who also believe that keeping the law to the T is absolutely imperative, because keeping the law is what will determine how we and when we get to the not the when, but how we get into the kingdom. It is something that measures our obedience unto the Most High. And we believe that by the law will help to maintain order and structure within our walk, so that we have a clear linear view of how to progress forward with Yah. However, what we miss about this concept of following the law is not about following the law. I'm going to repeat that again for those of you in the back, because you're probably standing up like, what do you mean by that? Following the law, or keeping the law, is not actually about keeping the law. Air quotes. Probably thinking to yourself, now wait a minute, Malik, hold on. You're the same person that goes around that's always saying that Christians are wrong for preaching that keeping the law is a bad thing. Yet you're now saying at the same time that keeping the law is not about keeping the law. So then what is the point that you're making? What do you mean when you say keeping the law isn't keeping the law? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because now I'm going to break it down to you and help you understand what I mean when I say that. The Tanakh was created for the simple purpose of, yes, establishing order amongst the Israelite community, as well as the mixed population that came into Canaan, which is now modern day Israel, when they came out of exile from Egypt, right? So the story goes. And the commandments were established for the purpose of giving the Israelites a general point of view of how to treat one another, as well as treat the Most High when you're in the presence of Him, or living your daily lives as individuals. The 10 Commandments were very simplistic in how you measure your character in front of people, as well as how you show yourself approved unto the Most High when it came to the law. However, what we seen in the Old Testament was that many of the Israelites within that culture did not seem to quite understand what it meant to keep the law. Keeping the law did not necessarily mean that you kept the law for the sake of the law. Keeping the law means that you kept the law for showing yourself approved to the Most High by means of your obedience. Keeping the law is a metric. It is a goal in mind that you strive towards, because you always want to make sure that, as a test of good measure, a test of goodwill, that you appreciate and you love the Most High. However, the problem that had stood back then is that a lot of people followed the law for the sake of the law. Well, if I broke the law, I could either have a second chance and be forgiven by sacrificing unblemished offerings onto the altar and burn it, or I could die, because there were certain things in the law that if you got caught, you would be killed, you would be purged from the community. Death was the final sentence of the law. But the problem that the Most High saw at some point within Israel's development as a nation is that the nation followed the law not according to the spirit, but according to the letter. So what ended up happening, particularly during the period that Moshe was there, going all the way to the time that Jesus then arrived and he changed the game as far as the law is concerned. Well, what we saw between during the exilic period, which was when Moses and the Israelites were out of Egypt, when they were captivated by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians released them and they were thrown into exile, was that the Israelites focused a lot on keeping God's law to the T. They didn't want to do anything that broke the law, because they believed that if they broke the law, then they were getting further and further away from the Most High. So the Israelites did this an awful lot, especially when they were being captivated by the enemy, especially when they were outside of their land, because Israel at some point was taken by both the Babylonians as well as the Assyrians. So they were living in different nations and during different time periods. And many Israelites became Hellenized or proselytized by the many gods and the idolatries and everything that was going on within these lands that they were captivated by. So God was losing the worship of his people. And so some of the rabbinical priests, or you would call them the Pharisees, many of them wanted to make sure that God's people still remained God's people. And so they created additional laws by means of the oral law. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, what is the oral law? The oral law is the interpretation of the law of which was spoken to the Israelite people regarding the written law, the law that was written according to the Most High. And what happened is that based off of the interpretations that the scribes, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees had about the law, they wrote additional laws on top of the Tanakh or Torah. So what ended up happening was that in order for the law to have been kept, you not only had to keep the law written by God, but you also had to keep the laws that were written by the appointed judges and elders of the community that were orally interpreting these laws. And so what ends up happening as a result is that the people are not following God at this point. They're following what their leaders are telling them, in which what you're supposed to do. At that time, you were supposed to talk to your leaders. But then what ends up happening? The leaders are leading his flock astray, because they are now getting away from actually worshiping the Father. They're trying to be perfect under the law, the physical written law. The problem with that is that the Most High, it wasn't about you keeping something to the T. The law is supposed to be a reminder for you to get better over time, strive towards being complete in the Most High, being faithful. Being faithful kind of ties into the thing about emunah, being faithful to the Most High. These things are supposed to be markers of milestones that show that I am still and will always be under Yah, an imperfect being, but I will, no matter what the circumstance is, I will strive towards perfection by continuing to follow the things that he told me to do, if it is within the law or outside of it. So now you then transition into the time when Yeshua comes and he kicks in, and he's creating this new covenant with Israel and Judah. And the reason why this is essentially important, because when people get to the New Testament, they now think that the Israelites of old did not matter. The culture didn't matter. Christianity now arises, and they're all preaching this nonsense that is completely dichotomous from what Jesus had actually been teaching to his people. Because it's somehow believed that when you get to Jesus and Paul and the disciples, all of a sudden there's these brand new supernatural teachings about how you worship God or you worship Jesus Christ. And that's not what this is about. Jesus was not a co-equal to his Father. He was under his Father and did his Father's will. We were not supposed to worship Jesus. We're supposed to worship the man that made him. But some believe, of course, according to the doctrine, that Jesus and God are one and the same. We're not going to get into that, though. Getting to the point, when you get towards Jesus, Jesus comes manifested in the flesh as a physical epitome of what Torah actually embodies. Of Torah. Even if you are outside of your captivity, you're not within the temple, you're not doing everything that was prescribed by the Most High, you can still, even when you're not in your land, you can still follow the Father's Torah outside of it. And even then, the Israelites were instructed of what to do when they were going into the land of their captors. Don't do what the nations do. Continue to follow the Torah as instructed. They were told what to do. But because some Israelites feared breaking the law, they fell into this legalistic nature of, I must keep it to the T, otherwise God will destroy me. On top of the laws that the rabbis had been installing into Torah that were not there. And Jesus talks about this because he himself was a rabbi. But he was trying to teach according directly to what the Most High had told the prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the way unto Moses, of how to be faithful to him in spite of your circumstances. Torah is not about circumcising the foreskin of your penis, although that was a law back then. But there was a spiritual indication behind that. God did not want you to merely focus on the fleshly things, which are the written things, but to focus on the spirit of things. And what that means is your dedication unto the Father through thick or thin. Right? Foreskin, circumcising the foreskin of your heart instead of the foreskin of what someone told you to do. So let me give you an example, right? The letter of the law would be that you are supposed to honor your mother and your father. But let's say in some sense or some degree or form, you dishonor your mother and father. According to oral law, or what the Pharisees have implemented orally, you are supposed to give your mother and father a gift of apologies, right? A gift of condolences, to let them know and indicate that you are sorry. This is your apology for basically dishonoring your mother and father. And then you would be forgiven of that law. Now, on the outside looking in, that doesn't seem to be a bad thing. What's wrong with giving a gift to someone that you might have done harm to, or you were negative towards, or, you made an offense to? The problem with this is that when you look at the idea of honor, to honor your parents means to respect them. Respect them in every way possible. Now, does this mean that you have to accept abuse? You have to accept evil things or evil orders that your parents give that goes outside of your faith? Absolutely not. But what it is talking about is that you should respect your parents when they tell you to do, when they do tell you to do the right thing, and then you don't do the right thing. So there's a mind thing. There's a mind application at play here. If you love your parents, you'll do what your parents tell you to do. But your idea of getting out of not doing what your parents telling you to do is, well, just give them a gift and then they'll be fine. You'll be forgiven. That's not how that works. If you disobeyed the Most High, do you give him an offering? Do you just simply give him a gift and say, am I forgiven? No, that's not how that works. Because what if you are liable to go back and do it again? You will be liable to go back and do it again, because it's now within you to disobey. The goal in mind of the law is to prevent you from being disobedient, and it's to remind you to remain obedient to your parents. The same way when it comes to God, you are constantly reminded to obey the Most High, so that if and when you break this law, you don't have to, if and when you break this law, you will be reminded of how wrong you were for doing it, which is the least of what the Most High wanted you to do. He didn't want you disobeying him. He didn't want you going against his every word. And that's what happened with the Israelites of those periods. They were just constantly sacrificing, but no one was changing their hearts, their mindsets, the way they thought about things, the way they were doing things. They were breaking the law over and over and over again. They were unfaithful people. They were going to different nations. They were worshiping different gods. An example of this was when the prophet Hosea was commanded by God to go marry a prostitute. And that Hosea would have 2 children, and he was commanded to name them accordingly to how God's relationship was with Israel. And Hosea went and married a whore. He married a harlot. He went and married her because this was an example of what Israel did to the Most High. They're very unfaithful. They're backsliders. They go back and they worship idols. They don't stick to the person who loves them. And no matter how much you continue to forgive them and let them in, they still continue to break his heart. But he still continues to love them in spite of the wrong that they're doing. This is how faithful the Most High Yah is to his people, in spite of them not being faithful to him. He made an example of this by using one of his people, his prophets, to go and marry an unsightly woman, which in modern day era a man would not do. They won't go marry a whore, although there might be men out here that have married whores. I don't know. Maybe you're one of them. But, not to belittle your situation, everybody has to learn somehow, some way. And that's what happened in this situation. They were unfaithful. What we lack within our keeping of the law, this law, is that a lot of us are not faithful. We're not consistent. We're not wholehearted in our fellowship with the Most High Yah. Yeah. Many of us are just doing what we want to do. Many of us are ignoring the works of being under the fellowship of the Most High. It's not about mere belief. It's not about keeping the law. The law is merely a metric. It's a goal. You don't keep something and fulfill it, and then you stop keeping it. Think about losing weight. When you lose weight, you feel good, don't you? The long-term goal is to lose weight. But in between the beginning of it and the end of it, there's criteria, there's the intern. So now you have to create an algorithm or criteria that will help you to reach the end goal of losing weight. So you do those things, and then you reach the point where you lose weight. But then see, here's the problem with that. You've lost weight, so the question is now what? Do you now start gaining the weight back? Do you continue to lose the weight? What do you do? Well, at that point, it's about maintaining. It's about remaining faithful to losing weight. You don't just stop at losing weight. You keep the consistency going. Everything that you learn from the beginning to the end, that strenuous journey of trying to lose that weight, you don't just stop at losing weight. You keep it going. You remain consistent, non-stop. You don't stop. That was the problem with back then. A lot of people, they just get to a point and then they're like, okay, I kept all the commandments. I kept the law. I did this. So now what does the Most High do? Now the Most High is not just merely measuring you by you keeping the law. Okay, that's great. You kept the law. You lost that weight. But now let's build your character about this. Let's build your mindset. You know, did you go out when I say did you go out? When someone came to you and said they were hungry, did you feed them? When someone came to you and said that you were thirsty, did you give them drink? When someone was down on their luck, or when someone was screwing up and following the Most High, did you lift them up slowly and you were nice to them and you taught them and nurtured their spirits back into health so that they can follow the Most High Yah more correctly and sharply, and they would be exhorted to be more courageous and obedient and humble towards both their neighbors as well as the Most High himself. These are very important things. It's not merely just about keeping law, it's about your character as well. And we've seen this in the Bible. Job kept all of the law, but Job was still found to be guilty of sin. And why was that? Because he thought he could not be touched because he kept the law. Keeping the law does not save you. Keeping the law doesn't get you into heaven. It is a metric that measures obedience. But you have to remain consistent of that metric. But not only that, it has to be applicable to things that you do for those who are not like yourself. You cannot just selfishly keep laws just to get into a kingdom. Laws are a part of the kingdom. They're not the end all be all of the kingdom. Your goal is not the law itself. It is about the journey of constantly striving to be better. Because that piety that you have can easily be downturned by the Most High, because we all got to realize no matter how hard we keep, no matter how perfect or 100% we keep this law, that doesn't mean anything. What it means is that you have obedience. But now can we take everything that we learned from there and apply it to everyday real life situations? Can we truly love our brother and sister? Can we truly give the things that we work hard for and help the poor and all these different things? These things matter. Character matters over everything. It does not mean that the law is null and void. What it simply means is that you take it, you learn from it, and you get better with it. And when you get better with it, you exude it and you show it to other people. Do better. Continue to do better. Don't stop. And that is the entire point of keeping the law. Keeping the law is not keeping the law. Keeping the law is remaining consistent in the journey. Staying true to the Most High. Being faithful to Him, regardless of your circumstances. Staying strong in Him. Once you stop doing that, then your heart becomes something of cold stone, because you're not remaining consistent. So ladies and gentlemen, that concludes episode 14. My name is Malik Washington, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good day or good night wherever you reside, and I thank you for listening if you got this far. Until next time.
Yeah.